Today we're going to repair an iPad Air screen, touch screen that's broken. This is actually the first one that I worked on, but I decided I might as well go ahead and make a video. So you can see here this is pretty well shattered at the top. We have our replacement part here, which interestingly has two flex cables for the digitizer, presumably. And on the right-hand side at the bottom, we will have another cable stuck to the inside that operates the home button. So you want to be careful of that when you're taking it apart. And you can see I've also taped this off at the top with some strapping tape, clear plastic where it's cracked, so that way we can minimize the amount of glass and shards that are going to be present when we work on it. So you will definitely want to use some heat when you remove the lens here. The adhesive is pretty heavy duty. And when you go to pry the lens away from the housing, you want to be very careful. It's easy to scar the rear housing on the iPad, so just be really careful. I tried to go in here with the plastic pry tool, did not work out, so I did have to switch over to the metal one. Again, just be very careful because it's very easy to damage the outside. Fortunately, the corners on this one were intact, so I didn't have to worry about straightening them up or anything. It's just the glass that was damaged, and you can see I'm just kind of making a very shallow pry here with the plastic tool at this point, because if you try to go down the edge with the metal tool, it's definitely going to scar the housing. In any case, up here at the top, you may have some controls for the power button and so forth. So just remember, you don't want to go too deep here. And there's not too much adhesive really. It's only about maybe 1/4 of an inch or so from the edge of the tablet. So you don't have to go too deep. Just want to get it to release from the frame. And I have a variety of pry tools I'm using here. That white one, the rectangular shape one you're seeing, actually came with a lens protector kit, and these work pretty well to pry with. The only problem is that they melt very easily, so when you're heating your project, they do tend to get distorted a bit. But the guitar pick style pry tools, especially the nylon ones, tend to work out really well in this situation. And I skip forward a bit here so you can see I've just kind of been working my way around the edges, and I do put some placeholders underneath the lens as I'm going around the sides. I want to make sure this thing doesn't stick back together, so I'll just take a credit card or a SIM card holder or whatever I happen to have handy and put these underneath the adhesive so it doesn't reattach itself. It's real sticky stuff on the inside. And what we're going to be doing is mainly concentrating on the left-hand side of the tablet, because this will open up from the left to the right-hand side if you're looking at it upright from the front. And one kind of awkward thing here, you can see I'm working on the bottom half right now. What tends to happen a lot of times is I hit the power button, so I'll have to turn this back off in a second. But on the left-hand side, you don't have to worry about too much. I was being very cautious on this one. It was the first time I'd opened it, and I wasn't sure what to expect. Someone had given me some disinformation about the home button flex, which is actually attached to the lens, so you don't have to worry about it too much. I thought it was actually glued to the frame, like the old, or stuck to the lens and going into the frame, like on the iPad 2, where you end up cutting through the Wi-Fi module. That's not the case here. You just have to make sure that you don't cut through the home button flex cable, which you'll be able to see here shortly when I open it up. And there you can see the Apple popped on because I hit the power button. And just trying to get a view inside here, since I don't really know exactly what to expect underneath the bottom half. So I was actually being overly cautious here, but better safe than sorry. I'm sure the home button flex doesn't cost very much. It's probably a good idea to have one on hand if you're going to be doing these repairs, just in case. Again, just trying to get a good look at what's underneath the lens here. And we'll skip forward here in just a second, actually speed the video up a bit. So you can see the cable there in the center. That's actually the home button flex cable, which I separated from the lens. That is an unnecessary step. But again, I wasn't entirely sure of what to expect on the inside here. So you can kind of see, just if you get it at the right angle, what's going on in there. In any case, we're going to work along the left-hand side, and you'll see how effective heat really is here in just a second, because I've kind of gotten under the lens, and the only thing that's really holding it is the sticky stuff between the glass and the frame. So you see I have to continuously power this off. I keep hitting the power button, unfortunately. And so as I'm kind of applying an outward pressure, what we don't want to do is put any, try to avoid any contact with the LCD whatsoever, or causing the glass to come into contact with it. But you see I'm kind of pulling it out and heating at the same time. And little by little, you'll see that the adhesive starts to give here. And then it just kind of pops off. And we'll continue to work around the sides. And plastic melts a little bit. Not too worried about that. And there's a little piece of tape here that's stuck. I'm just going to cut through that. It's not a flex cable, so don't have to panic. And you can see we moved over to the right here, and we've got the the two flex cables from the lens going underneath the LCD, and then of course the home button flex is actually was attached to it. Was stuck before, but I've kind of loosened that up. A little bit of residual adhesive stuff on the right hand side. Now what I did here is I actually closed the lens and double checked to make sure that the home button was still functioning. Just want to make sure that I hadn't damaged it for my own peace of mind. And go ahead and power it off again. And we're going to open this up, and this is kind of an interesting way that they put this thing together. We do have some residual adhesive up here at the top. We want to separate that but not put too much force on anything just in case we slip. Don't want to make any mistakes. So I'm going to prop the lens up here, and we've actually got 4 screws. There are 2 at the bottom and 2 more hidden screws at the top of the LCD that you won't be able to see. What we want to do first of all is get all the broken glass that's kind of hanging over the edge into the area of the LCD. Get that removed first of all, because you can't pull it out. You don't want to make any contact with the chunks of glass that are still there. And I kind of block off the LCD anytime I'm using direct heat on the edge of the frame. You do not want to heat the LCD up. They are very sensitive to temperature, so make sure you block those if you have to apply any heat. And you can see this stuff kind of comes off. It's a little bit gooey, but some of the glass tends to stick to the tape that's underneath. And if you're very careful, you can take a dulled razor blade and go underneath the edges here just to kind of get that stuff started. Be careful, it's very easy to get glass in your hands with these things. So we'll go ahead and remove these 2 bottom screws first of all. And then up here at the top, you'll have a couple of pieces of black tape, and I'm not sure why Apple does this. But you've got to remove this tape in order to see where the screws are. Again, not sure for the reason, but it could have something to do with the grounding issue. So I do recommend that you remove these pieces of tape and then replace them when you finish. Might not be a big deal, but I've seen people who just kind of poke through them with a screwdriver, and I don't think that's probably going to be in your best interest. A little bit of heat and a little patience, pair of tweezers, you should be able to peel this stuff off and expose the screws that are underneath. And then we can go ahead and remove those as well. All 4 of those screws, I believe, were interchangeable, but you want to check the length. There was one oddball, if I remember correctly, that was a little bit longer than the other 3, so do try to keep those in order as well. And at this point, you can actually have access to the home button flex cable. that's kind of really an awkward orientation here. But what I'm doing now is just taking a look and seeing where the flex cables for the digitizer are going to be located. And probably the easiest thing to do is just kind of flip the LCD up in this direction, and then that way you can kind of see what's underneath. There's a retaining plate that is actually glued to the pop connector for the LCD. So again, very interesting design on this one. Quite a bit different from the iPad 4 and everything previous. We've got 3 screws here in this metal plate that come out, and then you can actually disconnect just by pulling this straight out. And there you have your pop connector on the back side of that panel, which makes it a little tricky to get plugged back in because you really can't see where anything is. It's all hidden underneath that plate. And from here we have access to the pop connectors for the digitizer and also the flexible cable connector for the home button, which I had to look at under a magnifying glass to figure out which direction it went. So you see here I'm getting as close of a look as I can. It's a little hard to tell which direction this went, but you should be able to identify it. And then we'll take a pry tool and kind of pry this in the downward direction, as I recall. And then we can also release the digitizer. And next thing we're going to do is remove any existing hardware on the old lens, transfer it over to the new one. And I do want to point out that there is a little round metal ring that goes up against the lens right around where the home button is located. You can see I'm removing it here. Make sure that you take this off and transfer it over to your replacement part. I made the mistake of omitting this step previously, so I had to take the whole thing apart again to replace it. It's got a flat spot on the top and the bottom, as you can see there. So you want to try to keep that adhesive if you can. Stick it on, and it goes right up against the glass, and then the home button goes underneath that little metal ring. And once you have those installed, you go ahead and transfer over your flex cable assembly. Make sure everything lines up straight and that the home button is clicking. You can see I've installed adhesive around the edges. And what we want to do before we peel the plastic off of the inside and before we apply the adhesive or take the wax paper off the adhesive, I want to do a dry run here. Just plug everything in and make sure that we have full functionality of the home button, power button, volume, Wi-Fi, front and rear facing cameras, etc. Again, once we get this seated, we don't want to have to remove it. These cables are very sensitive. You do not want to put any stress on them. They're very easy to damage, especially because of the metal plate that goes on top of them. And at the time of this video, the lens was still pretty expensive. I believe they're about 75, 80 bucks a piece. So if you damage those flex cables, you're going to have to buy another one. So do be very careful. I'd kind of put anything you're going to prop the lens up with towards the outside so that we don't put a lot of stress on those cables. And if I haven't made it clear, do be very, very careful. Very easy to damage. We'll go ahead and install the home button. Flex cable, another tricky one. And you can see I'm using tweezers here and just very carefully pushing up on the edges I just want to be absolutely certain this is seated properly. And again, it's a little tricky to line up this metal plate. I got kind of lucky on this one. Do take your time, don't force it. And as you can see here, we just kind of put that over all of these cables. And I'm going to fold this over for the moment, power it up, test the functionality of the touchscreen and everything else. And as long as it's working fine, we can go ahead and apply the adhesive and we will be good to go. If you found the video helpful, hit the like button, share it with your friends, subscribe to my channel, and follow me on Twitter or Facebook. Post your questions in the comment section below or visit gocellphonerepair.com/forum. Thanks for watching.